Hey, my name is Sam Tall. I'm Director of Music and Content Operations at Studio71. You're listening to the Unsigned Podcast.
Sam, appreciate you coming on, man. We've known each other on the fringes a little bit for the last couple of years through
Yep,
your awesome Facebook group, and glad that we could finally get some time. Thanks to your team for reaching out and setting this up. But like I
absolutely.
said, glad we could chop it up.
For sure. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
pleasure to be here. I love, podcasting is a big part of Studio 71 now, and this is sort of like a flip on that. Sometimes we get to be the guests.
yeah, exactly. There you go. Cool, man. Cool. So yeah, let's just kind of jump right into things. And what I've been doing, especially over this last year, is just making sure that I use a little bit of airtime, that I'm starting to eat up and talk about things that are extremely important, outside of the music business. And one of them, obviously, is the Black Lives Matter movement.
Sure.
Especially within music, and especially with us being white guys, white executives in music. It's important for us to, always, kind of hold our feet to the fire and make sure that
Of course.
we're leading by example. So yeah, I just kind of want to start there. What are some of the ways that you've been educating yourself or donating your time, energy, resources over the last year? And yeah, just kind of any insight into other companies or other people that you think, listeners should be paying attention to absorb, that good information.
Absolutely. And credit to you for making sure this is such a pivotal part of your show too. I think it's really important. I feel like I grew up in a pretty progressive town on the East Coast, and so it always seemed like it just made sense for equality and equity across genders and across races to be native to the conversation. But what I found growing up, and as I get older, is just that there's still so much to learn, and that even our best intentions are still undereducated at best, thanks to society's ills. I think something that's been really important to me in the last, I guess, about a year now, because last summer was the first time that I had an intern in content operations at Studio 71, um, is I love the opportunities to give a platform or give rise to young women, young executives of color, basically people who don't look like me, because I had plenty of opportunities to get into the music industry. And I know that's absolutely not the case for a lot of others who well deserve it. A lot of people that I went to college with at NYU, and even that is like a selection of privilege being a student at NYU. But even there, there was a clear sort of difference in like who was getting looked at for the internships, who was doing what kind of jobs. It's like, if you're a young Black woman, you're probably going to get more offers for internships from the urban department at, it's a label, or from Rock Nation or Def Jam or something like that, than you are from, like the classical label, or, the Broadway music publisher. And it's kind of it's really gross, to be honest. And, so I try to do whatever I can in the small ways that I can contribute to, educate young music professionals or the future professionals in digital media, and provide that opportunity regardless of background, and really focus on quality of our internship candidates. And then, of course, in the entertainment community more broadly, just like very openly sharing information to anybody who wants it, and making sure that there's never a talking down. I don't like to foster a community where people are arrogant or gatekeeping about the information, because the fact of the matter is that um, you know everybody that has access to the same information can hopefully put it to good use and accomplish great things. And I'm fully in support of that every day.
Well said, man. Well said. Yeah, I think it's just like you said there. I think it's extremely important that it's about looking. It's easy to look at, just on one point, real quick. It's easy to look at like that next intern that looks just like you, right? And everybody does it in all walks of life, because you're just like, hey, this is me. I see myself in you. Come on, let's go. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, it's the person that looks like you. And it really is about trying to step back and have a little bit of patience and understand that, like, is this the right person for this role? Is this somebody that hasn't really gotten a shot? Have they do they understand their voice yet and how they can be speaking up, and if not, how can I help them? You know what I mean? Because I see a little something in them that's not me, and yeah, I think it's it's extremely important for us to do that, and I appreciate doing that. And again, kudos to you for doing that. Just like you said, in the community that you have in the Facebook group, like that's, I've been in it for years, and it really is about trying to have those discussions and allow people an opportunity, um, to grow and
Mhm.
to get that shot. You know what I mean? That they
One of
may
the
not
critical rules
otherwise
of that
had.
group, one of the critical rules of that group is support the newcomers. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
doesn't matter if somebody's asking a basic question, you answer it as if it's the first time it's been asked, because sometimes it's the first time that they're getting an answer.
Yep, exactly, exactly, exactly. So thank you, man, and appreciate you. I know it's definitely a tough topic, but I appreciate you, jumping into it
Sure.
as well right at the top here, man. So cool. So we'd love to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about your background too. So yeah, tell some of the, I obviously know a little bit more of your background than some of the listeners, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Kind of how you made your way to NYU, and how you got into rights management and made your way to Studio 71.
Yeah, I grew up playing music. I was very, very lucky to grow up being encouraged to just pursue passions and whatever moved me. And so I always had music lessons growing up, which was a huge advantage in terms of just getting deeply invested in music, which has always been something that really, made my brain tick. And studying that all the way through grade school and then into college, when I was applying to colleges, I had this feeling like I wanted to be a singer songwriter, maybe get into record production. But what I didn't want to do was be a conservatory student and sit in a practice room for 6 to 8 hours a day and run scales and work parts and then do ensemble and that kind of stuff. I loved it, like playing in like jazz band in high school and stuff like that, but I knew that that wasn't like necessarily my calling, that I wasn't going to be a virtuosic musician. So I should go and study something, related to the business side of music. I should go and find a place that can teach me about music business so that, I'm well equipped as an artist to fend for myself for as long as I need to. Because even at that point, 17, 18 years old, I'm thinking like DIY till I die as a mantra, right? So I started looking around for places to study music business. Back in 2009, 2010, there weren't nearly as many options as there are now. I feel like there's a lot of schools now teaching some facet of entertainment management or music business or something. And in the last 10 years, like a lot of, even some schools have two different programs. NYU has two different programs. There's the Steinhardt School and the Clive Davis Institute. Syracuse has two different programs.
Yep.
USC has two different programs. So like all like the marquee ones have two different programs, and there's a bunch of like other schools across the country that have one that's actually a lot better than people might think. But at the time, it was really just NYU, USC, and at the time, I was like, I don't want to live in LA. I wanted to be in New York. I grew up on the East Coast, moved away for a little bit, and was like desperate to go back. So I got into NYU. I would say a little bit of luck because I wasn't a very academic student, but also a very passionate sort of like subject essay that I wrote because I was already like thinking about digital formats and like how to distribute music and stuff in 12th grade.
Yep.
Um, and almost immediately I had this sense that I didn't want to be a musician anymore. I wanted to be like running a record label. Like I wanted to be like Rick Rubin. I wanted to produce and have a label in my
Yep.
NYU dorm room, just like Def Jam used to be, right?
Yeah.
And that didn't last very long because I found out pretty quickly that running a record label is really expensive, even if it's just like a dorm room label. It's a lot of time, and marketing is expensive, and recording costs are expensive if you're not doing it all yourself, kind of thing. Um, and that's kind of how I stumbled into artist management. Was um, sophomore year of college. I had a friend that I went to like a music camp with when I was a kid, And he was a singer songwriter out on Long Island and was starting to get some national attention. And I said, "Hey man, I'm studying this in school. I understand that you've got like some frustrations or stuff around like making records or putting things out or going on tour and handling that stuff. I don't know what a manager does necessarily, but I'm studying how the music business works. Let me be your manager." And that's like one of those classic tales, right? It's just like,
Yep.
let me do this. Please let me
Let me
do this
figure it
for you.
out.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And so we were just figuring it out for 4 years, and then eventually decided we were never a very good fit to begin with. But we both learned a lot about what it took to get started. It was the first tour I ever went on, the first couple of records I ever worked releasing, press and shows and all that kind of stuff. I really got my feet wet there. And I managed from that point on, I managed a few other artists like Kevin Garrett, who was published by Rock Nation and distributed by AWOL. I managed a band called Valley, who were signed to Universal Canada. Um, I managed this artist called Violet the Skies from the UK, who's signed to AWOL, and like was like a fiercely independent kind of songwriter, like really cool, but like had that sort of international experience. We did some like festival dates in China and things like that, which was ridiculous. But all the while through that, artist management was never like paying the bills. Sometimes there would be tours that were profitable, records that would come out, or a label advance, like with the Universal deal. And like that would be cool, but it's not like permanent income, and
It's hard to live off that.
it's very unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's very like high risk, low reward in a lot of ways. So
Yep.
all through the story, I'm working full time, right? I started when I was in college. My first ever internship was at Downtown Music Publishing, and that ended up being my last internship because I was there for a semester and a half. It was like the summer and then like the first month or two of the fall. And then they promoted the receptionist to be somebody's assistant. So they said, "Hey, you've been here longer than any of the other interns, i.e., 5 months instead of two. If we know you're still in school, but can you do this like 12 to 8? We need you to like just sit at the desk from like lunch until like after everybody leaves to lock up." I'm like, absolutely cool. I don't care what it pays, just pay me something.
Yeah.
And like
Yep.
I still have my dorm housing. Like I'm good, and I want this job more than anything. And it made my grades tank, but it gave me experience that when I graduated, and I wasn't able to keep with that job because of coursework that I had to complete. But I was able to go into the job market with almost a year's worth of existing full time experience, background in sync licensing a little bit, understanding just how an office functions. With like at the time it was like 30 people. Now Downtown Publishing is like 300 people. Incredible company. And so after that, after graduation, I worked at YouTube for a year. And at YouTube, I was just very data entry, and but it was in content ID and rights management and fixing a lot of the sort of metadata problems that were existing for especially major labels and publishers, where at the time it's like 3 years into the existence of content ID, it's still pretty new. The music industry moves like a shipping barge, and as we know, that's no longer a strictly secure sort of analogy that can get stuck sometimes.
Right.
And so I learned really quickly there that like doesn't matter how big or how small your organization is, it's possible to get it right and it's possible to get it wrong. And the risks of getting it wrong can be really, really, really valuable. I mean, we're talking like commas in the dollar values of the kind of money that just gets locked up in the system because the metadata is wrong. So after a while, I did that job for a year. I had the opportunity to kind of focus on Kevin Garrett for a while. And then a few years after that, I went back into the job market and worked at this company in New York called TuneSat, much smaller organization. I decided like the big sort of YouTube corporate environment wasn't for me. Google's a great place to work, but you have to have a lot of like work ethic. And at 23 years old, I didn't really have a whole lot of work ethic. I just knew some stuff. And so that kind of like got kicked out of me through the artist management experience, and I figured out like, oh, I know how to work now. So I went back and got a stable job, and I was doing um, rights management from the perspective of music production libraries where their music was getting used in ad campaigns without a license, or the licenses that they had done for their music in these ad campaigns had expired, but they were continuing to run on TV and on the internet. So it was a whole process of identifying where that music was being used, reaching out to the parties involved and saying, hey, this is actually, verging on copyright infringement. We got to have a conversation about this. And then so just the process of identifying this in the digital landscape and bringing it into like this sort of legal context really set a tone for me for the value of copyrights and the importance of protecting small composers and things like that. I was there for 3 years and then I joined Studio 71, packed up my life and moved from New York to Los Angeles. And I've been at Studio 71 for almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in July. And it's a lot more, the work that I do at Studio 71 is a lot more client facing, a lot more dealing with YouTubers and music creators on a regular basis. But it's the same sort of mentality of like, we got to get your metadata right. We got to defend the fact that you own certain rights and certain interests in the stuff that you create. The content that you make is yours. Even if it's a cover song, you still have certain rights. And we got to make sure that those rights are asserted, protected, monetized in your benefit. So end to end, it's really just this sort of like, I've been waving this flag of independent artists and like making sure that the value proposition works in their favor to the extent that I can. And, obviously we're never going to tilt the balance from Universal, Sony, and Warner kind of like controlling 75% of all the money on the table, but 25% is still a lot to play with. And so if I can get even a shred of that for the artists that I care about and the artists that I work on behalf of, it's a good day for me.
Yeah, man. And it's only growing. Like it is that
Absolutely.
25%, but it's getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, I think eventually there will be a watershed moment probably in the next decade or so.
The
But
entire
I
environment is
think we'll,
certainly turning in favor of independence and do credit to folks like Macklemore and Chance the Rapper for making it
yeah,
like a banner event to be independent. But yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're doing now too is just an extension of artist management. You know what I mean?
I
This is
agree.
like it's the same thing. You're trying to protect artists, you're trying to make sure that they get the value that they deserve.
And you know what's fascinating about it is I definitely think about it in that same context, but it's a different direction of it in the
Yeah,
sense that
absolutely.
artist management, at least for me, but I think this is true for a lot of others as well, is that you are very deeply involved with a limited set of artists. And so you know every single facet of their business and even probably their personal life. But you can only have the bandwidth for,
Yep.
maybe 4 or 5 clients individually. And if you have a team, maybe you can do more than that, or you can share the load, that kind of a thing. But managers, there's a sort of upper bandwidth of how many like micro companies you can run, right? Then what I do now is I do the one thing that I'm really good at for as many
Is that
clients as
scale? Yep.
possible.
Yep.
And so it's the same sort of like purpose, but it's a very different sort of like taking it and putting it on a different angle and find that it really works for me.
Yeah, I love it, man. I share a lot of those same things, and again, even with this podcast, it's kind of the same thought. It's like you can only work with so many artists at one time. It's like, hey, let's share that same information, making sure that they know how to build their careers, how to protect their rights, how to grow, how to scale,
Totally.
and just do it more than one at a time. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, that's awesome. So you've been in the business for close to a decade now, if not a little bit longer than that. You've worked, at labels, management companies, just like you were talking about, ran your own. Obviously, big. We talked about it a couple of times already, but the Artist Managers Connect Facebook group. Shout out
Hmm.
to you guys. Had wanted to make sure we plug the name. Go check them out. But with all that said, and you talked about going to China too. So with all that said, has there been a project or kind of a highlight moment or story that you'd be down to share of the career so far?
Yeah. I think there's sort of like two light bulb moments I think that really set the tone for a lot of things that came after or are still in progress. One of which was um, Kevin Garrett was the first artist that I worked with where I first felt like I really understood what an artist manager does. And at the time, I was co-managing Kevin with Rock Nation, in addition to Rock Nation acting as publisher. So I got a really good schooling in how a management company at that scale works, while still sort of like having this, you know, independent manager, independent artist relationship. Kevin was somebody that I met as a student at NYU. He was in the music tech program. I was in music business. And so we connected that way. And over the years, just kind of built a relationship. And then we were both after school, started working together when his music started moving on SoundCloud. And I was starting to make just a little bit of a name for myself in our sort of like friend circles as a music business person. Um, and I remember the week that I left the job at YouTube was the same week that his first EP came out. And so it was like that Friday that his EP dropped. There was some show he played. I don't remember if it was Knitting Factory in Brooklyn or if he did like a session at the Sour Patch House when that was a thing.
Yep.
Sour Patch Kids like brand activation thing.
Yep.
And I remember standing in that room, having left the YouTube office for the last time, like, man, this is my life now. This is what I do. And it what like ultimately didn't end up being the case that that's what I would do forever. And I'm actually kind of grateful for that because artist management is really hard. But suffice it to say, that was kind of a moment where like I was like about to turn 23. I had like put in a lot of hours to try and bring this to life, and I felt like this is what like making it might feel like someday,
Yeah.
you know. And so that kind of like made it clear to me like, okay, there is possibility if you just like do the things that you have to do to get it done regardless of the cost, you can get someplace even, you know, at this point in time. And of course everybody who's 23 is just like, I've been alive for all this time, I'm trying to get
Yeah.
stuff done. And looking back, I'm not even much older. I'm 28, I'll be 29 in a month, and I'm like, man, I was so naive.
Yeah. Right.
But then that kind of brings me to the second light bulb, which is this actually happened last year. And of course, there's a lot of like personal development that everyone's had to go through in the past year. Um,
Absolutely.
we signed a client, and for lots of reasons, I'll keep things vague, but we signed a client that we've been trying to sign for a while and kind of proving the concept of what we can do at Studio 71 to help them. They make music on YouTube. They were with a different network. They were doing great in terms of growing their own channel, but the revenue was lacking because the music rights weren't really happening for them. And there's lots of reasons why that's a problem for cover artists on YouTube. But it's mostly just because it's not well explained, it's not well maintained, it's not really in YouTube's interest to do anything about it.
Yeah.
The publishers and the record labels don't really want to get too involved. It's kind of a Wild West situation. But it's been almost 10 years of me knowing how these rights work, and I want to make sure that they're working the way they're supposed to. I look at it as the system that's meant to work a certain way, and when it doesn't, it's a failure of the system, not just a failure of an individual band or company or, you know, operator. And so I kind of take it as a bit of a duty to make things right. And the end result is they came into our network finally. They joined Studio 71 as a YouTube client, and we were working with their music and setting things up right. And almost overnight, we were able to multiply their revenues on YouTube. And the reason for that is just because nobody had ever tended to the garden before. And suddenly you pull back all the weeds and there's all this fruit, right? That's very much what happened. And it's not like the kind of thing that happens every day, but in this particular instance, it was so gratifying to just like, in a lot of ways, kind of just turn on a light switch and say like, yeah, it was always that easy, but you were just being underserved. Welcome to the light side. Welcome to the people that actually care about what you do. And it just was, you know, personally gratifying. It's always personally gratifying when like independent artists are just so overjoyed that they can quit their day job, they can invest in new production equipment to make their content even better, that they can really kind of like invest in their future because of something that I did. That's always a wonderful day. And so that's become sort of the success story that we like talking about whenever we're talking to prospective clients that we think we can do the same thing for.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's I've learned that too over the last couple of years, that just being able to help with the knowledge that you have is extremely gratifying. And
Yeah.
then when it works like you think it can work, like the way it should work, you get that amazing outcome, and then you're just like, it's fucking awesome, man. Go and kill shit. Good luck. Like, I'm here if you need me. Like, you know, and that's always amazing to be a part of. And then especially during
Mm-hmm.
this time, right? It's been such a hard year in so many different on so many different fronts. To get those small wins, it's like that's what's helping us get to the next moment in time, which is great. And especially for
Yeah,
artists too, like not being able to tour. It's like
exactly.
it's extremely tough, and it's still going to be another 6 months or so, I would imagine, before things kind of really pick up, and probably next year around this time for artists on the come up to be able to tour, but
Club
yeah,
shows are
man,
going to be hard,
that's
especially,
yep,
I think especially for artists where like they're used to having that to fall back on. Like,
yep,
yeah, maybe the record doesn't perform that well on streaming or whatever the case is, but they know that they're going to move tickets. Well, it's like they've just spent years not really minding their streaming business too much because they could rely on that. And now it's all they have, and it hasn't ever been really kind of like prepared for this. So I think it's a big awakening moment for a lot of independent artists where it's like you got to keep all your house in order no matter what time of year it is.
yep. Well said. And yeah, the show piece I think is going to be tough for a couple of reasons. Number one, people just actually coming out to see you. You're still going to have the mask hurdle, the vaccination hurdle. I'm sure they announced today that the CDC said you can go out without a mask anywhere. But who knows what can happen in a few months if
Mm-hmm.
things get bad again in the fall or whatever. But you're going to deal with that, and then also I think you're going to deal just from a competition standpoint. I think it's going to be great for
Absolutely.
the music fan, but it's going to be extremely hard for the artist because everybody's going to try and get out.
Yep.
So I think we're going to have an amazing, as music lovers, we're going to see, I would imagine, some amazing tours, right? We're going to see, like when I was a kid, I went to the Rock the Mic tours, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Ja Rule, Busta Rhymes, Fabulous, Missy Elliott. Like that's fucking
Legendary.
insane, right? Exactly. Right. I think you're going to see those types of runs again because everybody's going to try and get out, which then
Mhm.
they should ultimately be able to charge a higher ticket price and get those people out. But I think you're also going to see some of those big artists go down into those smaller clubs to get that intimate moment, to also charge a premium to say, hey, if there's only 500 seats in here, or it's a standing room only for 500, we're charging 250 a ticket. You know what I mean? And I think those will be, again, great experiences for
Yep.
fans, but it's going to make it tough for a little while for those artists that are kind of in the middle of the pack or just starting out, and
Absolutely. I mean,
hopefully,
it was like a crown
go ahead.
jewel moment for clients that I was managing to play like Bowery Ballroom in New York
Yeah.
or the Troubadour in LA. Like when we're talking about 400 to 600 tickets, it's like you're graduating from this 200 cap level that you kind of get stuck at a little bit at the early stages. And if now we're talking about artists coming down from the theater level to play the ballroom level because they want to have like an intimate comeback to normal kind of event, it's going to lock a lot of the smaller artists out of the opportunity that they need
It
to get
is.
their like re-earn their
Yeah.
income that they were hoping to have last year. And I'm
It's,
already
it's,
like
it's going
talking
to
to
be
some
tough.
artists who are planning, tours that are happening in September, October, November, when normally at the like the low club level, you're talking 2 to 3 months out. And here we are talking like 5 to 6 months out.
Yep.
And then all the artists that are talking that would typically be talking 5 to 6 months out are like, okay, we're looking at next summer. We're looking at 2022 festivals, maybe like spring theater runs, stuff like that. And I'm like, this is wild. It's everything's just getting so backed up that it's going to take a while for it to clear. But like you said, it's going to be incredible for fans of live music to go out and see some stuff that they would have gotten the chance to, just because literally everybody wants to put on the absolute best show to welcome the world back.
Yep. Top to bottom. It doesn't matter who you are. And you're not only, and I'm sure there's some selfish artists out there too that are doing it for themselves. They want to
Yeah,
get out there and just
yeah,
do some dope shit. And it's like,
yeah,
great. That's just going to
and make a
be,
lot of
again,
money.
great for the fans as well. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So cool, man. That's awesome. So want to get kind of into the weeds a little bit with you and pick your brain about a couple of things. Want
Mhm.
to start right with, kind of your day job at Studio 71. What does your day-to-day look like? And do you guys work with, up and coming artists? Or are you guys searching for talent that's already popping? You mentioned some people, they already had some income, but it wasn't fully optimized. Are you guys looking for everything? Tell us a little bit more about what the company does and how you guys operate.
Sure. So for context, Studio 71 is a global media company that, I mean, we work with like creators and brands across like all video platforms you can think of. So everything YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Snap, TikTok, as well as some ones that you might not know about. We do, you know, custom channels on things like Roku for like Minecraft and Roblox and kids content, like really runs the gamut. Really deeply involved in podcasts now. I think we're closing in on something like 100 shows. By the time that this goes out, it might even be more than that. Our podcast team are hustlers. And you know, we're also rapidly growing what we do with music, which for me is like really exciting. Um, so across all of YouTube, music content, as far as YouTube likes to tell us, music content something like 5% of the content on the platform, but like 25% of the watch hours. So there's a huge over index in terms of like consumption of music. It's the YouTube is number one music discovery platform in the world. It's the biggest music streaming platform, even though people don't think of it as a music streaming platform. It outpaces a lot of other companies. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's mostly free. But it also the fact that there's so much content there that doesn't make it other places because it's not official, it's not formal, it's not like it's a live cut, it's a rarity, it's something that's added print, things that you just can't get anywhere else. You know, recordings from like Thomas Jefferson, like, or sorry, Thomas Edison. My mistake. I was like Thomas Jefferson. That would be cool.
Yeah.
No, Thomas Edison, like original recordings, man. Like you can find them on
Yeah.
YouTube, but you're not going to listen to that stuff on Spotify. You know, so
Yeah.
stuff like that is like the rarities and the deep cuts are way in there. So, you know, we're as far as music is concerned, um, always on the lookout for interesting creators who conquer a niche and do something really spectacular that and they also kind of play into the way that the system works. I think a lot of like artists maybe bristle at this concept that like Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, had said like you just got to make a lot more music than you're making if you want to succeed on Spotify. And everyone's like, well, how does that comport with being an album artist and making great art and like taking your time with it? And it's like, I understand, but there are different types of artists for different eras and different platforms, right? Like that's a very suitable mentality when you're pressing vinyl records and vinyl records have like a 6 month, you know, backlog to pressing, and then the pressing takes time and shipping takes time and the whole thing takes a lot of time. So you have a lot of time to make your record because you know your
Everything
last
else
one's
takes
still
time.
in production when you're working on the next
Yeah.
one. Whereas now everything moves so freaking fast that a lot of our creators that are working really well on YouTube are posting once a week. That's not to say they're creating once a week. They might be creating in bulk, but they're posting once a week or they're scheduling those posts to happen once a week. And so we're having these conversations about bringing in the music rights and the music assets and setting them up so that whenever they want to go for it, they can go for it. We're right there behind them, ready to make that revenue come through for them, and that we don't get kind of tangled up in any kind of like demonetization, third party claims, all the big sort of specter stuff that people expect from a platform like YouTube. And those can be big artists, those can be small artists. I think for us, what we find works well are creators that are already kind of in this cadence and already finding a flow and building an audience. Of course, like any company, there's got to be a certain amount of existing traction for us to be able to keep the lights on, right? That's like everyone's like complaining about record labels that like, oh, you need to already be famous for them to come in and make you famous. And to some degree, I understand, but there's also a lot of overhead in running that kind of a company. And there's also a lot you can do as an independent artist now that you never could before. So there's a little bit of we're closing that gap between like making that jump to working with a large distributor or a large label or even an indie label or a digital media network like us. So we are kind of like looking at things that are past a certain point, but we're not, ignoring what's below that threshold. We're obviously paying close attention to all kinds of things and very perceptive to things that are growing quickly. Discovery is always important, especially in music. The minute something pops off on TikTok, you've got every label under the sun chasing it. So if we're going to succeed with music, we got to be part of that mix a little bit too. But we do take the different angle of like we're not a music label, we're a digital media company, and we distribute, primarily videos. It just happens that a lot of our best videos are music.
Yep. Yep. Well said. And I just want to touch on one thing too. You talked about just the production of it.
Hmm.
of people making music. What I think's very interesting in that up and coming artists need to realize is the just spending their time wisely, right? Too often we get caught up because it's so easy. Like, oh, it's on my phone. Let me just make this thing and let's just do this thing right now. And that's just not a way to create content or build a sustainable career. You're just going to get burnt out. It
Hmm.
really is about take a week or 2 weeks or take a month, right? A month is okay. Map out how you want to create a bunch of content that could last you 3 months, or take one day. Uh, uh, you're going to have that time where you just take 1 or 2 days, map out your stuff for the next week or 2 weeks, shoot it all in one day, and then chop it up over time. Change your shirt, change your hat, whatever you have to do,
Exactly.
but do it all in this compressed, timeline that's cut out. So that way you give yourself the time to go and be inspired and to
Hmm.
live your life and do those other things that aren't like, oh shit, I got to be on the clock. I got to post this video right now. Because if you leave it up to that, you're not going to post the video when you need to,
Yeah.
because you forgot the time, you didn't write it down on your calendar, your mom needs you, your dad, your kids need you, something pops up. You really need to, if you're really serious about having a career in the entertainment business, you have to be um, as professional as you want a label to be, or a distributor,
Yeah.
or a digital content company. It's like
It's
you got to
funny. I
come
hear
prepared.
artists talk about, why doesn't my label do what they said they would do? It's like, why don't you do what you said you would do? Like, if you want creative control, if you want to be in the driver's
Yep.
seat of your career, it's a lot of responsibility that comes with all that power. And you got to actually like deliver all the create. If you want to have creative control, you got to deliver the creative concepts. And the designer at the record label is going to say, well, like, what do you want to do? And you're going to be like, I don't know. Why don't you have any ideas? And the answer is because the band asked for creative control. I've
Yep.
been in that situation before, and it's like everybody's looking at the other one, just like, where's your idea? And they're like, we're not the one who's supposed to have the idea. And the other
Yep.
just says, yes, you are. And it's almost like we're, jinxing each other back and forth. And it's like, communication is key, but if everybody, especially the artist, wants to make it happen, it can happen. And it's not rocket science. I think this is like the part that I always laugh about with other uh, artist managers, music industry folks, even some artists, frankly, is like, look, as much as we love music, as much as it's like fundamental to the human experience, and as much as people can say like, "Oh, this song saved my life," which is a beautiful thing to feel and to hear, we're not saving lives like doctors are saving lives. We're not saving lives like firefighters are saving lives. We're not, if anything, in the rarest of cases, are we ever even coming close to that? So for the most part, we're just trying to give good vibes, right?
Yeah.
And it's not crazy hard to get people to feel good if what you're making makes them feel good. It's just a matter of getting the word out there. And I just find that a lot of artists and even managers and labels, they kind of treat it like it needs this big, grand sort of rollout that's just going to fall flat and cost too much money and this and that. But the reality is, if you make something that people love and you just like hand it to them and ask them to love it and keep them coming back for more, it's gonna work. It's gonna keep growing. And shout out
Yeah.
to my friend Sammy Edelson and her artist Adam Turley, who's out there like doing a single every month for the past like 2.5 years. And he's not famous, but he's grown every single month. And he just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, slow and steady. And if he keeps going the way he's been going, and it looks like he's gonna, and I'm very proud of that pairing, because they've worked together from the beginning. Good friends of mine. It's gonna pop. It's gonna go the way of like Lauv, where
Yep.
it like turns into an independent artist with billions of streams. And again, Lauv is an artist where I knew him from NYU. A buddy of mine was his manager at NYU. I watched it from the beginning. I'm like, of course that makes sense. Like, it takes time to get there, but of course it makes sense if you just keep doing the thing that you do really well.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same breath, I think what needs to be said with that is it's about knowing the type of music you make and who you're making it for.
Hmm.
I think that's extremely crucial, because if you do that, if you know who you're making the music for, now it's just about super serving them. And then it's about living up to what you said you were going to do. It's on you
Hmm.
at the end of the day. A record label, anybody else that comes in, that should just be fuel to the fire. Cool, great. You guys want to give me a bunch of money? you should already know where that money is going to be spent and how you can take your art to the next level. And again, how you can give back to your community. And if you think about it in terms like that, just like you said, you'll win, because it's about giving yourself and being like, hey, how can I be helpful? Just like, I'm trying to do with this podcast, just like you've been doing with your, with the Facebook group. It's like, hey,
Totally.
I'm just here to bring you together and do the work. So
Exactly.
well said, man. Appreciate it. Um, want to talk about content for a second
Sure.
specifically. Is there a type of content that you see performs better than other things, or does it really depend on who's making it? Obviously, you guys focus on video, right? But is there a specific type of video content that, like, hey, man, is it a behind the scenes one that works better? Is it a fucking review video? Is it a cover video? Like, is there something that works great across all platforms, or is there one thing that you think kind of sticks out?
I don't think there's any one sort of like content type or format that works better than anything else. I think what works better than anything else is consistency and quality as this sort of like holy pair, right? Um, all social video algorithms on the internet favor creators that keep coming back to the well and keep driving traction, right? So if we think about a lot of these platforms, their sole purpose is to sell advertising to an audience. um, what's going to work to keep that audience on platform coming back? The answer is if their favorite creators are constantly posting there. So it doesn't matter whether it's once a month you're putting something up on Spotify, or once a week you're posting on YouTube, or every day you're posting on Instagram, or 3 times a day you're posting on TikTok. The fact is you have to keep doing it at that routine. And that's why we talk about a posting cadence or a content calendar, or like the way that the content rolls out, and why it's important to kind of front load sometimes if you feel like you're going to have to take a vacation for a couple of weeks and, get
Right.
out of the burnout cycle. You can kind of schedule stuff to be in place for you, but using the platforms for what they do best, using your tools for what they're for, as opposed to trying to make them do something that they don't necessarily do. That's how you succeed on a platform, especially like YouTube, where it's so algorithmically driven and it's so ad based that if you're consistent and if your content is really high quality in terms of visual, in terms of sound, in terms of narrative, if that's applicable to you, it's going to work really well. But you have to be patient and consistent. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of creators is they drop the ball on consistency. It doesn't work within 3 months or even a year. And they say, well, if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. But then you look at some of the social blade stats for some of these YouTube channels, and it took them 3 years of constant posting to have this like hockey stick moment where suddenly they're like front page of YouTube and they're trending, and every single video they post after that gets over 1 million hits, right?
Yep.
So I would say for anybody out there listening, like, why is my stuff not connecting? I would really evaluate how consistently you're doing it.
Well said. Be honest. Be honest with yourself and say, how are you really doing that?
Are you just doing it when you feel
And
like it, or are you actually like committing to it like work?
yep. Because that's what this is. If you really want to make it, you know what I mean? If you really want to be independent and you
Yeah.
really want to own that, it's fucking work, and you have to decide that. I say that, not to discourage. I say that to like level set, like,
Yeah.
yo, you got to come prepared. And I think it's important to say that because a lot of people are just like, fuck the label, I'm independent. When it's like, hold on, you should really understand what you're getting yourself into, because it does matter. It
Hmm.
really does.
Absolutely.
um what are got some quick hitters here for you. What are the top two platforms that you'd recommend for artists starting today, if they were just fresh out the gate in high school or in college or right after college? They're like, hey, I have a limited amount of time, but I really want to dig deep on a couple of platforms. What would you suggest?
I would say make sure that all your music is always on Spotify, because Spotify is sort of this middle ground between like high premium stream rates from like Apple and Tidal, and like high exposure rates with like YouTube. Spotify kind of falls in the middle of that, where it's very high discovery rate, but the revenues could be okay. So for about like every million streams you get on Spotify, it's roughly $3,500 after distribution, et cetera, like that. So if your song goes viral on TikTok, and that's my number two choice, then you can actually end up making quite a bit of money on Spotify. Or if you build a really religious audience and every song you put out gets 500,000 streams, and then next time it's 1 million streams next year, and then the year after that you've grown to a point where every song you put out is 2 or 3 million streams, and you do it once a month. You're making at that point six-figure income as an independent artist, and it's totally doable. It's just a matter of building that audience over time. How you build that audience over time these days, there are a lot of platforms for this. Instagram's fantastic, Snapchat's still really positive, YouTube is still, really valuable, especially for us at Studio 71. But TikTok is kind of like superpower. If you engage with the community, if you overinvest your time in figuring out what's working on TikTok, what's going viral, what's trending, what challenges are top of mind for everybody, like where people are, you know, really look at your For You page on TikTok and replicate the stuff that you love because you just feel like you want to be part of that scene. Firstly, you're going to get connected with other creators that are also in that scene because they're going to notice you just like you notice them once you start to cook. And secondly, if you start to feed in that you like, oh, I make music, I do this thing, I do that thing, I do the other thing, in addition to everything else and being part of that community, you're going to start to find traction happen. But you got to be consistent and patient at the same time.
Want to get your take on real quick. I just thought of this one in TikTok, allowing users to jump off platform, right? What I noticed was working with an artist in the fall. They went viral on TikTok, and everything else blew up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Spotify followers went nuts. You know what I mean? Instagram followers went nuts. TikTok followers went nuts. A bunch of people signed up for his newsletter, right? Do you think that TikTok does a great job in your experience? Have you seen that as well, that TikTok allows users to jump off the platform as well and go elsewhere as opposed to Instagram? I mean, Instagram is really trying to keep you on there. The same artist had the same video go viral on Instagram a couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks later and maybe 2 weeks later, and he just got more Instagram followers.
Right.
Didn't really grow anywhere else. So I
Yep.
was curious, yeah, just your thoughts on that.
I would say, as far as all the different platforms are concerned, TikTok maybe does the best at allowing you to take your audience elsewhere, but no platform really wants you to do that. And Facebook, as an organization,
Yep.
including Instagram, is super tight about it, which is why they actually stopped embedding YouTube videos and just having them link out because it's a worse experience than posting a native Facebook video. They just don't want you to leave the platform. Same thing with YouTube. They want you to keep hitting those recommendations and not leaving YouTube. They want you to keep, on that don't touch that dial kind of attitude, but ported to the internet. With TikTok, they have a specific space for you to link out to your Instagram and your YouTube, which I think is great and allows that thing to happen, but it's still very sort of like self-directed discovery. TikTok is a really easy place to stay for 2 hours. I've done it. I do it all the time. I get sucked in until they tell me I've been scrolling for way too long. Here's the thing, though, is if all the things you do elsewise are very unified, if your handles are the same everywhere, if your name is obvious, if your images are consistent across your Spotify and your Instagram and your TikTok and your profile photos all match up, people are going to know that it's you. And that's the most important thing, is that when they go hunting for you, they can find you. No platform is going to help you do that. No platform is going to want the users to go elsewhere. But if you make it as easy as possible for people who do want to go elsewhere to find you, you're going to find that crossover effect, that bleed effect, platform to platform.
Gotcha. What are some of the things that you see artists constantly forgetting when uploading their content? Let's just take YouTube, for example.
Sure.
What are a couple of things that are like, hey, artists, like you got to step it up here?
Really good video titles. The title of your video doesn't have to be just the song title. That's actually the most boring way to do it. Don't treat YouTube like it's Spotify. You got to put some pizzazz in that title. You got to put a description that has like, first person narrative that says like, "Hey guys, this is my brand new music video. Hope you like it. Here's what the story's about." But like from a written narrative perspective in the description. Put all your credits, put all your links down there. Make sure like everybody knows how to find you in other places, because again, the platforms don't want people to go elsewhere. You got to give people the tools to come and find you. And what I also notice is that I think some artists still kind of have this idea that there's this mystique about being an artist in like the old school 70s, 80s, 90s. Like, I'm going to put out a record and be like a star and like, I'm untouchable. The reality is you got to be in your comments replying to everybody. You got to be in the conversation. It's no longer a one to many megaphone. It is a one to one to one to one to one to one to one. These are all the friends rallying around you now. They're just friends you haven't met yet. And if you treat it like that, you're going to have a much faster growth trajectory than if you try to just make things that people like and hope that they share it when they have no idea who you are. You're just some artist.
So well said. Like so many people on the come up are just like, I make great stuff. Why aren't they fucking with it? And it's like, well, you want them to, you're not trying to engage with them. You're just like, here, like this thing. And they don't know you. Why should they care about this at all? I don't know you. I have no idea who you are.
Making great
And
stuff is the cost of entry. That's the ticket price. If you don't make great
yeah,
stuff, you don't even get to be in the party. But once you make great stuff, maybe you get your foot in the door and you're like at the coat check at the club. That's the equivalent of making great stuff. You have to somehow
yep.
get past into the next room and then make your way through the like if you want to be the person at the club in the VIP section and be the most poppin', you've got to have every reason to be there more than anybody else. And that's way harder than I think people think. But there's some very simple things you can do to at least get started.
Yeah. Oh man. So well said. The barrier to entry is so low right now because technology has made it so readily available. The trick becomes how do you stand out amongst the noise? And
Mm-hmm.
that comes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, just consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be fucking consistent. You got to, and you got to understand that this is work, consistent, professional, engaging. And that's going to take you a really fucking long way. Those are like the big things. And I think, unfortunately, we have, it's the entertainment business. So we highlight those couple of moments where it was super easy and someone just made a song and hey, it went
Mm-hmm.
out there. And technology is deceiving as well because they're like, oh my gosh, like I can just make this thing and put it out there. And your parents are like, wait, why don't you just put it on YouTube and get famous? It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's not how it works, right? Like there's a lot more that goes into it.
Oh,
So,
I've had that
um,
conversation more times than I can count. I mean,
yeah,
Billie
yeah,
Eilish
exactly.
and Lil Nas X and Justin Bieber are the exception to the rule.
Exactly. And again, it's just they became so fucking big that everyone's like, well, everybody can
That's
just
how it
do that.
works,
And it's
right?
like, right. And it's like, no, no, those tools are there, but you still have to do the work. And I think it'll be interesting over the next 10 years to kind of see what happens to that because I think, kind of a little bit your generation, my generation, you there was that misconception where it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I thought I just had to put it out there. But now you're seeing these 18-year-old kids who've had the internet their entire lives. So they've already been making content and putting
Yep.
it out there their entire lives. So it's going to be interesting to see if they continue with it because they're already doing it and they're just so accustomed to doing it. And if that will, you'll see more and more kind of middle class, so to speak, level of artists than previous
Absolutely.
generations, which I think is absolutely possible. It'll just be
100%.
interesting to see if that trajectory keeps going or if people are like, oh my God, I'm so burnt out because there's so much technology. Holy fuck. Like, I need to relax.
I think
But
there's going to come a point where there's a reckoning, but the nativity of the Gen Z environment is so fascinating to me. I remember in my Facebook memories, it's like 2006 or something like that. Like I posted something complaining about YouTube not working or whatever the case is. Like YouTube existed for me at that point in time, and there are people making music on YouTube who were not born yet at that time. And it's like they've never lived in an era that did not include YouTube and possibly even Instagram. And there's going to
yep,
come a time where there's a generation of people who did not have a life where TikTok didn't exist. And for a
Yep.
lot of people, I think their memory is so short that perhaps that feels the case. But the reality is, like, when you're born into an environment where that's the standard, it's a lot easier to make use of it. Whereas if you're born into an environment where like iTunes is the standard, for example, or CD sales or tape sales or vinyl sales are the standard, you're gonna have a hard time like adapting and figuring out why is what I'm doing not driving the money that it used to. It's like, well, because the money's different. The money's still there. It's just somewhere else, and you're not somewhere
Yep.
else anymore.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, it's a lot of older artists have that, are stuck. They're like, I don't
And
want to be on
I
TikTok. I
feel
don't
for
want to be
them,
doing
man.
this thing. And it's like, yeah,
I'm like,
it's
I
crazy.
grew
It's
up
like,
listening to jazz and playing jazz, and I love that stuff. And
yeah,
like, rock is going to go the same direction. I think the elder statesmen of hip hop are going to struggle, I think, to connect with the new generation because of hip hop fans. But it's like, if you want to be part of the future of it, you can. Nobody's telling you you can't be. Like Bill Nye is hugely successful on TikTok. Why?
yeah,
Because he's great and he's adaptive. He knows how
yeah,
to move with the
yeah,
times. But if you don't know how to move with the times, you're going to be complaining about how it used to be and how it isn't that way anymore. But like Robert Glasper's out here making jazz records that people really dig and making a lot of money playing shows and making records. And jazz is still well alive. It just sounds different.
yep, yep. And it shows up in a different spot. And you
Mm-hmm.
got to go and find it in a different way. Well said. Couple questions here just to close out. I know we're running a little over time, but great
Cool.
conversation, so I'm not mad at it. Hope you aren't either.
Yeah.
But uh, kind of piggybacking off the last question about forgetting artists forgetting things when they're uploading content. Is there a way that they can kind of systemize uploading some of that metadata on the back end? So is it just as simple as like spending a couple of days, writing out exactly what you want it to be, and then remembering to copy and paste, and then okay, shit, I need to like review this every couple of months and see how this is stacking up, and go and make any additional edits kind of moving forward. Is that an insight, or is there something else that they can be doing too?
For the most part, when it comes to music
Again,
metadata,
sorry, just I was going to say, just kind of focusing, I guess, mainly on the DSPs and
yeah,
YouTube, just to put some parameters around it.
sure. For the most part, I think the good thing is like music metadata is a statement of facts about the song, right? Or about the record or the songwriters. It's not something that changes over time necessarily. And so if you get it right once, it's going to stay right. But if you don't get it right the first time, it's going to be a problem that doesn't really show you that it's a problem. It's just going to kind of be there and not pay out. If you're registering all your songs with your performing rights organization and your songwriter information is correct when you submit the records to Spotify through your distributor of choice, and the artist name is spelled right, the song titles are right, all this information is correct, just keep a record of like the fact that you have these things called ISRCs, that you have UPCs associated with your releases, that you have a IPI number from ASCAP and BMI, that you have a URI for Spotify that identifies your artist profile. Like there are all these little codes that associate that for technical purposes are sort of like how the server understands the location of things or the identity of things. But every single digital asset you have has a sort of like a social security number, right? A unique identifying code of some facet. If you keep track of that, you'll always know where your stuff is and you'll always be able to protect it, and it'll never change unless for some reason it has to be re-encoded or you get a remix done or whatever. So if you get it right the first time, it's done. When it comes to like YouTube descriptions and things like that, which are very powerful for like attracting eyeballs and getting people to click through links that you put in your descriptions and stuff, you can templatize that. You can kind of make it like title is artist, song, catchy phrase in parentheses, hey guys, blurb, credits from like the director of photography, songwriter, producer, lighting, costume, whatever, links to socials here. Like you can really bracket it out and make it systematized. And that's something that we recommend to a lot of our creators, not even music creators, but just like everybody, just like have really good description formatting so that all your information is consistent and people know what they're looking at when they're looking at it. Otherwise, they're going to have to like think about what it is. And honestly, the less you have to make people think, the easier it's going to be for them to do what you want them to do. So it's like a twofold problem of like on the one hand, if you get it right the first time with the metadata, your money should flow. And on the other hand, if you get your formatting right in terms of like what your visual appeal is on photos that you post on Instagram and on your Spotify profile, how your bio reads, how your descriptions read on YouTube, if everything's very consistent and very formatted in a way that's custom to you, not formatted like go and get somebody's recommendations off the internet, come up with something that's good for you, but keep it regimented that way, and it's going to keep working. And if it's not working, tweak it, make it work, and then once it starts working, don't break it.
Well said. Well said. All right, last question for you before a little
Sure.
bit of a plug session. We've kind of already hit on this, but wanted to ask the question a little bit more specifically. You know, obviously the Kevin Kelly theory from probably the last 10, 20 years is the thousand true fans,
Mm-hmm.
being able to sustain a creator. Are you on that bandwagon? That's since kind of been adapted where like, hey, you don't even need 1,000, you need 100 true
Right.
fans. I think based on this conversation that you're definitely in the camp that believes that is true. But again, wanted to ask the question more directly and just kind of get your thought and take on that.
I definitely think it works unequivocally with an asterisk. And that asterisk is it's not that you should only have 1,000 fans. It's that you need at least 1,000 true fans to make the whole thing possible. And this is a big part of why Patreon exists, why crowdfunding was a thing for a long time, is because there are fans who will over contribute versus the value they get because they love it so much that they want to buy in, they want to support, they want to be part of the story. It's not about what they get out of it. But for a lot of fans, a lot of the audience, it is what they get out of it. They want to be entertained. They want to pay $20 for a shirt that's really good and not $40 or $100, or they're not into a limited shoe drop from a artist who's also a sneaker designer. Like that's for some people. The thousand true fans exist in the niche within the niche. So if you're really good at what you do, as opposed to what everyone's doing, and this is something that we're really good at with Studio 71 and a lot of the music creators we have, where they conquer a specific niche. Scott Bradley's Postmodern Jukebox. They make old timey jazz covers of pop
Yep.
songs. Scary Pockets. They make funk covers of some of the best songs I've ever heard. Like First to 11, they make metal covers of pop songs. Like so Our Last Night have this cover of Astronaut in the Ocean that's blowing up, but it's like screamo. It's so good. But they're like specifically doing their thing that they do really well, and they're doing that over and over and over again, and it's working. Again, consistency is key, knowing your shtick. Not everybody who watches those videos is a subscriber. A lot of the people keep coming back to those videos and never subscribe. Doesn't mean they're not a fan. It just means that they're not, for whatever reason, subscribing. So there's a bit of a funnel here. And I think people maybe hear the word funnel and they think, oh man, we're talking sales scams now. We're talking MLMs. We're talking crazy stuff. But the reality is everything kind of functions in this way where like you have a bunch of people who see your thing. And maybe for you, a bunch is 1,000, not a million, not 10 million. But whatever a bunch is relative to where you're at, a bunch of people see your thing. Some number of them engage with your thing. Of the ones that engage, some of them take an action you want them to take, like subscribing to a newsletter, subscribing to your channel, following you someplace, buying something, which is like the ultimate engagement. And of those that take that action that you want them to take, some number of those will do it again, right? Or they'll become a recurring supporter, like a YouTube member or a Patreon subscriber or whatever the case may be. They'll sign up to your super exclusive NFT subscription project, whatever the case is. So, on the one hand, you have these people who are over invested in you in a really productive way for them emotionally, even if it's not productive for them financially. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have people that only ever want to be casual observers. That's still very valuable. They have to get from A to B. It's not just like, I'm suddenly going to be your biggest fan. They've
Right.
got to
Right.
build over time that relationship with that fan. So you can have 1,000 true fans that underpin your business as an artist, but that's your 1,000 true fans. Let's talk about your 10,000 more casual fans or your 100,000 casual observers who just heard about you once and might still listen to your record when it comes out, maybe would consider buying a ticket. And that's like the extent of what they're willing to do. But every time they do that thing that's like the furthest limit for them and just the beginning phase for a true fan, it's an opportunity for you to make them a true fan, for you to connect with somebody new, and for you to say, hey, thank you for doing something that was maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone or a little bit of a risk for you as a casual observer. Welcome to the family. Now you're part of something and you're welcome here, and you can be part of this fandom as well. And you just build that relationship over time. That's, to me, that's what 1,000 true fans is. It's not just like have 1,000 fans.
Yeah, definitely a misconception for sure. And it is about, it's about going deep, just like we've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about, going deep on a very specific thing and then just being consistent with it.
Yep,
And it's gonna
absolutely.
take a while. It really is gonna take a while. But again, like anything worthwhile, it's you got to put in the effort. You know what I mean? And then there's no such thing as free money. You would much rather or what I tell people is like up and coming artists is like it's okay to struggle now. That's the point. You need to learn how to sharpen your
Mm-hmm.
skills, sharpen your tools so that you know how to view and approach things. Try and drown out some of the, the excess look at me, look at me, look at me thing. Focus on one or two apps, right? So you can go really deep with them and then go deep with the content and then go deep with the community and then again be consistent, and over time you'll start to see those little wins that get you from one thing to the next. And it's fucking hard, it really is. Like you may
Yep.
have to have that job, you know what I mean? You may have to work that shitty job that you don't really want to do to pay your bills, or you may have to live with your parents. But if you have the game plan and you can and map that out, that's how you'll be able to mentally stay in the game, because that's a big part of it too. You get burnt out. You're like, oh, fuck, it didn't work. I don't want to live in my mom's basement. Everybody else is off doing their thing. And then you start thinking
Yep.
about what these other people are doing. So stay
Patience
true
is
to
the hard
yourself
part.
and be patient. It really is. And it's hard because you're just inundated with so many forms of social media and you're looking at what other people do. It's like FOMO, and
Yep.
it's just at the craziest scale. And you really, I think it's important for us to have the conversation to talk about time management, especially in music. It's like, get off the apps. Like you need to put those
Yeah.
blocks on your phone. You need to set up those production schedules for yourself so you're not
Mm-hmm.
sitting there scrolling constantly trying to look for stuff. Spend an hour or 2 hours at the top of your week looking at what's moving, what's not moving. That's your research. Then spend the next 2 hours mapping out how you're going to do it, and then spend the next 2 days making the shit, and then roll it out over the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's how you can be a part of it, but also have the distance that's needed so that you can refill, that inspiration that's needed.
I literally had an artist come to me the other day, a couple days ago, and she was like, I have so many things on my to-do list. My brain is fried. I don't know how to handle and put anything in priority. Like I feel like I'm constantly working and chasing like the deadlines. And I said, okay, well, let's make a list of everything. Let's write down what those deadlines are. Let's write down how much time everything's going to take. And let's figure out how much space you need to give each action. And there were a couple of points, once we broke it out like that, there were a couple of points where she was going to be behind schedule on a couple of projects. But if you look at like the bottom of the to-do list, once you get to the bottom, she's like 3 weeks ahead of schedule on those tasks. Just because you're able to bracket out how much time it would take and give yourself some buffer room and that kind of a thing.
Or you start to realize what's not important too. It's like,
Yep.
I don't need this shit.
You
You
can
you
bump that to
have
the
to
end of the
learn how to
list at
say no.
worst, you know? Like
Yeah, yeah.
unpaid work gets to the bottom of the list, but it also doesn't have to be done urgently. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that, like that importance versus urgency matrix. You
Mm,
know, if anybody doesn't know what I'm
yeah.
talking about, go look it up.
Yeah.
Basically, things that are important and urgent, you do now. Things that are important but not urgent, you just make sure that it gets done. Things that are urgent but not important, you try to just put out the fire but not let it waste your time. And things that are neither important nor urgent, you just don't even deal with because it's not a problem for you to solve.
Yep. And man, time management and learning to say no is extremely crucial, especially when you're young.
It
Especially when
took
you're
me my
young,
entire
because
life to this point to figure that out, and I still don't think I have.
yeah, yeah, it's super hard. Yeah, exactly. Because new things happen and new, your family grows, you have kids, and now that's taking up time, and that's
Yeah, man.
now you're losing time elsewhere, and you have to really manage this. But it is, I think that is an extremely key thing that up and coming artists should try and realize.
Hmm.
Bucket your time and cut yourself off from social media. Give
It's not
yourself
just like
those
free
blocks.
flowing creativity all the time, woo woo magic. Let's just make art, bro. It's like it's a production, it's a
Yep.
process, it's a craft more so than an
Yeah.
art. Like the art is the creating the music, the craft is the producing it, the craft is the getting it out there. like that's, I think people forget that arts and crafts are go hand in hand.
Yeah, and man, and again, this is like technology is, our savior and our detriment. You know what I mean? Like it's you gotta understand that. But I don't think people are really having this conversation, especially in the music space. Like maybe over the last year, like mental health has become the conversation. But I think, which is important, I also think we can add to that some tactical things like, let's just keep it basic. Get off your fucking phone. Figure out a way to get off your phone. That is it. That if you can start there, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
then you're in a great spot. And then everything, just like you said, you start to bucket out, okay,
Mhm.
what needs to get done and when,
Exactly.
and you'll put yourself in a good spot. So all right, man, we're coming down to time. Appreciate it once again.
It's fun, man.
Couple two final quick hitters for you. What are you working on that you're super excited about, and where can people get at you?
So, what I'm working on that I'm really excited about is just the constant shave off little pieces at a time of making monetization better for our creators at Studio 71. Um, I got the great honor recently at the beginning of March of uh, being promoted to not just focus on music rights, but also how we manage content in general. And so that now includes a lot of the video stuff. And so now taking a much wider lens than I'm used to, but taking a lot of the same things that have been really working for us from the music perspective over the last year and a half and applying them to other types of content and other ways that copyright as a concept can be leveraged as a resource as opposed to as this sort of pesky administrative thing we got to consider and get claimed by labels and all that kind of stuff. But how can we actually like turn that into a positive, and how can we work with people to be productive partners and be part of the conversation and also maximize the money that we can make for our creators who are by and large independent artists in their own right, even if they're a vlogger, a makeup artist, whatever have you. It's not just the same as music anymore. So that's really exciting for me because I'm just such a like a systems thinker about that, trying to make things efficient and effective, so that when people trust us with their livelihood and their content, and they work with us and trust us to do a good job, that we are doing the absolute best job in the world, bar none, and that nobody else in the industry is able to do a better job than us. And frankly, part of the reason that I feel so passionate about that is because I've seen a lot of people do it really poorly. And it's just sad that independent artists get the short end of the stick and can't do anything about it. I want to do something. I want to be part of the part of the solution, not part of the problem on that front. And then where you can find me is I'm on Instagram at Sam D Tall, middle initial D. That's the same handle for everything: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I don't post on TikTok, but I like watching TikToks. I'm all over the place.
Yep.
And that's where you can find me. Hit me up, DM me. Let's talk about music rights. Let's talk about independent art. We mentioned Artist Managers Connect on Facebook. It's a group for music industry professionals, mostly artist managers, but it's really open to a lot of other people as well now. I think it's about 7,500 and growing. So it's becoming quite a large community, but there's a lot of amazing information in there for new music industry and entertainment industry professionals to sink their teeth into and tap into the collective knowledge of people from literally all over the world who are sharing insight, not just on like how stuff works, but like the latest changes with the Music Modernization Act, how to make sure you're claiming your royalties from the Music Licensing Collective, like literally brand new stuff happening this year. We're discussing it all the time. And also, if you ride motorcycles in Los Angeles, you might see me out there. That's been my COVID sort of like getting outside kind of thing is riding. I got a
Yeah.
motorcycle last year, and it was not a moment too soon because then suddenly we're locked inside. I'm like, well, I'm riding my motorcycle everywhere.
Yeah, man. There you go. I saw when you posted that, I think on Instagram, and I was like, I envy you for sure about being able to get out. I don't know if I'm ever getting on the back of a bike myself, but that shit looks cool. It looks cool. I can't.
It's
I was
sweet,
like, damn,
man.
that's a dope bike.
I go 3 minutes down the road. It's the most fun 3 minutes of my life.
Yeah, definitely. Hey man, again, glad we were able to do this. Look forward to catching up when we can grab a beer or something,
For
maybe out in
sure.
LA or New York. But again, man, appreciate the time.
100%. All right. See you soon, buddy.
All right, cool, man. Talk.